The black market was alive with noise and shadows. Voices echoed under the rusted metal roof, calling out prices for creatures locked behind thick bars. The smell of sweat, fear, and old blood hung in the air. Everywhere, cages were stacked high, filled with beings from 100 worlds. Some growled, some cried softly. Some stared at the ground without moving. To the traders, they were not people, they were products, bought and sold like grain or cattle. In the center of the market stood the auction stage, a long raised platform with chains dangling from hooks, a place where the traders displayed their captives to the crowd that came to see, to mock, to laugh, and to buy. Among them was a girl, young and fragile-looking. Her skin was pale with a faint shimmer under the dim lights. Her wrists and ankles were bound by metal cuffs. A price tag hung from her neck, written in bold alien script, not by her name, but by her weight. The auctioneer, a tall alien with sharp teeth and a voice like grinding stone, laughed as he introduced her. A fine pleasure animal, he said. Rare skin, soft bones, worth every credit by the kilo. His words made the crowd cheer and whistle. The girl's name was Rena. Though no one here cared, she had been dragged from her homeworld months ago, stripped of dignity and hope. Now she stood under the dim lights, her head down, trying not to cry. She had learned tears made them laugh harder. One alien in the crowd shouted, "Too skinny for the price." Another called, "She won't last a season." The laughter roared like a cruel wave. The auctioneer slapped her shoulder, spinning her around to show her off, like a butcher showing meat. Rena's mind drifted. She imagined she was somewhere else, anywhere else, maybe back in her village, where the wind smelled of flowers, but the sound of the auctioneer's hammer brought her back. Starting bid. The auctioneer shouted, 200 credits. Hands went up, numbers rose, but none of it mattered to Rena. She knew the ending. Someone would buy her, and then she would disappear into another cage, another locked room, another life where she was nothing more than a body to use then. From the edge of the crowd, a voice spoke, calm and clear. "I'll pay it all." The market fell silent. Heads turned, eyes searched for the speaker. A human stepped forward, tall, dressed in worn but clean clothes, his dark hair messy, his eyes sharp and unshaken by the stares around him. His name was Ethan, though no one here knew it. The auctioneer frowned. "You didn't even hear the final price," he said. "I heard." "Enough," Ethan replied. "I'll take her." The crowd whispered. Humans were rare in this sector. Rarer still in the black market. Most traders didn't like them, too stubborn, too unpredictable. Ethan walked to the stage, pulled out a pouch, and tossed it to the auctioneer. The heavy sound of credits hitting metal made the alien's eyes widen. He opened the pouch, counted quickly, and grinned. "Sold." The auctioneer shouted, slamming the hammer down. The chains on Rena's wrists and ankles clinked as a guard stepped forward to unlock them. Rena didn't look up. She had been bought before, sometimes by the cruel, sometimes by the bored, sometimes by the ones who wanted to break her spirit just for fun. She had learned not to expect kindness, but then something strange happened. Ethan took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm. It smelled faintly of soap and clean air. The crowd murmured, some laughed. "Look at him." One alien jeered. "He's already treating her like a pet." Another said, "Humans are soft." Ethan ignored them. He guided Rena down the stage, his hand firm but not rough. She stumbled slightly, not from fear, but from weakness. She hadn't eaten properly in days. They walked through the narrow market streets, passing more cages, more faces pressed against bars. Some reached out with trembling hands, some whispered pleas. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept moving. Rena glanced at him from under the jacket. His face was unreadable, his eyes scanning the crowd. Always aware, always watching. She didn't understand why he wasn't dragging her or shouting at her. Finally, they reached the outer gates of the market. The air outside felt different, cooler, freer. But Rena didn't allow herself to feel hope. She knew this could still end badly. "Where are we going?" She asked softly, her voice dry and cracked. "Somewhere safe," Ethan said, his tone simple, as if it was the most natural answer in the world. Safe, Rena thought. The word felt heavy, foreign, almost dangerous. She had never trusted it before. Behind them, the auctioneer counted his credits again, and somewhere in the shadows, a pair of eyes followed Ethan and Rena, unseen by both. The market's noise faded behind them, but the chains in Rena's mind had not yet fallen. The road away from the black market was narrow, lit only by flickering lamps and the pale glow of the moons above. The sound of distant shouts and clanging chains faded behind them, but Rena's heart still beat fast. Every step she took felt unreal. She kept expecting the man, Ethan, to turn into another dark alley and show his real intentions. She had seen it before: kindness in public, cruelty in private. But Ethan walked steadily, his pace neither hurried nor slow, one hand lightly on her shoulder to guide her, his eyes scanning the shadows as though he knew trouble might follow. They passed through a quiet street lined with closed shops. The air smelled faintly of spice and old wood, a rare pocket of calm in a city that thrived on noise. Rena hesitated before speaking, her voice low and unsure. Why did you buy me?" Ethan didn't look at her. "Because I wanted to," he said simply. That answer confused her more than silence would have in her life. No one had ever wanted her for anything except what she could provide, and it had never been good. She wrapped the jacket tighter around her, as if hiding from his words. They reached a small building at the end of the street. Its door was metal but clean. The walls showed no signs of rust or rot. Ethan unlocked it and gestured for her to step. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with a simple bed in one corner, a small table, and a heater glowing softly. The air inside was warmer than the streets. "You can stay here," Ethan said, pointing to the bed. "Rest, eat, and don't worry about anyone hurting you tonight." Rena froze, her mind refusing to accept the words. She expected him to add a but there was none. Instead, Ethan placed a small box on the table and opened it. Inside were packets of food and a bottle of clean water. He handed her the bottle first. "Drink," he said. She stared at it for a moment before taking it, her hands trembling. The water was cold, fresh, nothing like the stale liquid she was used to. She drank in slow sips, afraid it would vanish if she finished too fast. Ethan leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, watching her without pressure, not studying her like a possession, but like someone trying to decide how much she could take in one night. After eating, Rena sat on the edge of the bed, unsure if she was allowed to lie down. "You can sleep," Ethan said. "Doors locked. And you're safe." Safe again. That word, it made her chest tighten. She didn't know if she could believe it. Hours passed, and Ethan stayed in the room but kept his distance, reading something on a small datapad. Rena finally lay down, pulling the thin blanket over herself. Her eyes stayed open for a long time, watching him in case he made a sudden move, but he didn't. He didn't even look her way unless she moved. When morning came, the first light through the small window woke her. She sat up slowly, expecting to see Ethan gone, but he was still there, sitting in a chair, drinking something from a cup. "You're awake," he said. "Good, we've got things to do." "Things to do?" The words made her tense, but when he handed her a folded piece of clothing, plain but clean and free of chains, she realized what he meant. "You'll need these," he said. "We're going outside." Rena stared at him. "Outside? Where?" "Someplace better than where you were," Ethan replied. "But we'll need to move carefully. People in that market don't like losing their merchandise." Her chest tightened. "They'll come after me?" "They might," Ethan said, his tone calm but serious. "That's why you stay close to me." They stepped out into the daylight. The streets were busier than last night. Vendors shouting, carts rolling past, smells of food and engine oil mixing in the air. Rena kept her head down, afraid someone might recognize her. As they walked, she noticed the way Ethan moved, not just walking, but always watching, always aware. his hand never far from the small weapon at his side. They stopped at a shop where Ethan bought more food and supplies. The shopkeeper gave Rena a curious glance, but said nothing. Outside, Ethan handed her a small bag to carry. "You're not a prisoner anymore. You carry what's yours," he said. The words struck her. No one had ever said something like that to her. She nodded slowly, gripping the bag tightly. But as they turned into another street, Rena felt eyes on them. A shadow moved at the edge of her vision. Ethan noticed too. "Keep walking," he murmured, his voice low. "Don't look back." They reached another narrow alley. Ethan guided her in, pressing her against the wall. "Stay here," he whispered. Stepping out to scan the street, she waited, her pulse racing. She heard footsteps, then a muffled thud. Silence, and Ethan returned, his expression calm. "Nothing to worry about," he said. "Just someone too curious." Rena didn't ask. What happened? She wasn't sure she wanted to know. That night, they stayed in another safe place. Smaller than the first, Rena sat by the heater, watching the way the shadows danced on the wall. She didn't know where this human was taking her, or why he treated her like more than a thing to sell. But a small, dangerous thought entered her mind. Maybe, for the first time in years, her life wasn't already decided. The second safe house was quieter than the first. It was deep in the lower levels of the city, where sunlight only came in thin streaks between metal beams. Here, the streets were narrow, and most people kept their heads down, avoiding trouble. Rena sat on a small stool, her hands wrapped around a warm cup Ethan had given her. The steam rose slowly, carrying the smell of something sweet. She hadn't tasted anything sweet in years. Ethan was at the table, cleaning a small device, his movements steady, his eyes focused. He hadn't asked her for anything since they arrived. Number orders, no demands, just silence and space. Finally, Rena spoke, her voice low. "You said people from the market might come after me." "They will," Ethan said without looking up. "They don't like losing what they think they own." The word own made her shiver. She set the cup down, staring at the floor. "I've been owned before," she whispered. "For years." Ethan stopped working. His hands rested on the table. "Do you want to tell me?" he asked. She hesitated. Her breath caught in her chest, but something in his tone, calm, not pressing, made her feel she could. She told him about the night her world burned, the raiders who came in ships with black sails, the fire that swept through her village, her parents' voices shouting her name before they were swallowed by the smoke. She told him how she was dragged onto a slaver ship, chained in the dark, surrounded by strangers crying, how they sorted the captives, sending the strong to the mines, the skilled to the factories, and the pretty ones, like her, to the pleasure trade. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "They never called me by my name," Rena continued, her voice shaking. "Only by my price. My weight. They'd weigh me every few weeks like I was meat. If I lost weight, they'd punish me. If I gained, they'd raise my price." Her hands clenched. "I was sold 3 times before you found me, each time worse than the last." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes hard. "You survived," he said. She gave a bitter laugh. "Survived, yes. But I'm not sure what's left of me." For a long moment, there was only the sound of the heater humming. Then Ethan spoke. "Rena, the people who did this to you, they want you to believe you're broken. That's how they keep you in chains, even without the cuffs." She looked at him. His voice was steady, but his eyes held a fire she didn't understand. He stood, crossed the room, and placed something on the table in front of her, a small silver pendant, shaped like a star. "This belonged to my sister," Ethan said. "She didn't make it when my world was attacked. I kept this because it reminded me that some things are worth protecting, no matter the cost." Rena stared at it, afraid to touch it. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you're worth protecting too," Ethan said simply. Her throat tightened. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever told her that before. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm. Ethan would leave for hours, returning with supplies and information. Rena stayed inside, but he began teaching her simple things: how to lock and unlock the door, how to check if someone was following her, even how to hold a small blade. At first, she resisted, saying she wasn't a fighter, but Ethan only said, "You don't have to be a fighter. You just have to know how to survive." One evening, while they ate, Rena asked, "Why were you even in that market? Humans don't usually go there." Ethan paused before answering. "I was looking for someone. Did you find them?" She asked. "I found you," he replied, his tone quiet, almost as if he hadn't meant to say it aloud. Rena felt her chest tighten again. But before she could speak, a faint sound reached her ears. A tap on the window. Ethan moved instantly. Crossing the room and peering through a narrow gap, he cursed under his breath. "We've been found." He grabbed a small pack and handed it to her. "We leave now." Rena's heart pounded. "Who is it?" "Not someone we want to meet," Ethan said, pulling on his jacket. "Move." They slipped out the back door, the narrow alley twisting and turning. Above them, shadows moved across the walkways, heavy boots clanging on metal. Rena followed close, remembering his warning. Stay near him, always. They reached a hidden stairway that led to a lower level. Ethan moved quickly but carefully, avoiding open spaces. At one point, voices echoed nearby. Ethan pulled her into a dark corner, his hand lightly over her mouth. She felt his heartbeat. Through his chest, steady, controlled. The voices faded, and they kept moving. Finally, they reached another small shelter, this one even more hidden. Ethan locked the door behind them, then leaned against it. His breathing calm. "That," he said, "was your first lesson in disappearing." Rena sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "I thought you said we were safe." "We were," Ethan said, "until someone decided you were worth chasing." She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of the market coming for her again, or the fact that she was starting to believe Ethan really meant to keep her safe. The safe house was deep in the Undercity, hidden between walls of rusted metal and forgotten stairways. From the outside, it looked like a collapsed storage unit, but inside it was dry, warm, and quiet. Rena sat by the small heater, pulling Ethan's jacket closer around her shoulders. She had not taken it off since the day he gave it to her. Not because she was cold, but because it felt like the only shield she had in a world that had always been cruel. Ethan moved around the room, checking the locks, scanning a small handheld device for signals. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Always looking for danger. They found us once," Rena said softly. "They can do it again." "They will try," Ethan replied without looking up. "That's why we move again tomorrow." Rena's stomach tightened. She had grown tired of running, but she understood now. The black market traders would not just forget her. To them she was stolen property, and they wanted her back, not because they cared, but because they hated losing. Later that night, Ethan went out to gather supplies, leaving Rena alone for the first time in days. She sat on the bed, listening to the faint hum of the heater. The room felt bigger without him in it, colder somehow. She stood and walked to the small window. The view was nothing but a narrow alley, lit by a single flickering light. Shadows moved across the walls. Too many shadows for a place this quiet. Two figures passed below, speaking in low voices. "Human took her," one said in a language she barely understood. "Worth a fortune. Boss wants them both," the other replied. "Alive if possible." Rena froze, her breath catching. They were talking about her when Ethan returned. She told him what she had heard. His jaw tightened. "They're getting bolder," he said. "We'll have to deal with this before they get close." The next morning, Ethan took Rena through the maze of narrow streets, always moving, never staying in one place too long. The Undercity was alive with activity. Traders shouting, carts squeaking over uneven ground. The smell of oil and fried food in the air, but beneath the noise, Rena began to notice something else. The way people looked at them, glances that lasted a second too long, whispers that stopped when they walked past. "Ethan," she whispered. "They know you. They know of me. he corrected. Big difference, but it still means we have to be careful. They stopped at a small stall where Ethan bought a packet of dried food and a flask of clean water. The stall owner, a short alien with pale, milky eyes, leaned closer. "They're asking questions about you," he said to Ethan. "Dangerous questions." Ethan's face didn't change. "Then tell them nothing." The alien gave a nervous laugh. "I tell no one anything. Unless they pay well." As they left, Rena asked, "Do you trust anyone here?" "No," Ethan said simply. "Trust gets you killed in a place like this." By midday, they reached a quieter part of the Undercity, where the walls were covered in old graffiti and the ground was damp. Ethan led her into a narrow alley, stopping near a side door. "This is a friend's place," he said. "He owes me a favor." Inside, they met an older man with a mechanical arm and a scar across his face. He gave Rena a long, unreadable look before nodding at Ethan. "You've picked up trouble," the man said. "I tend to do that," Ethan replied. The man, Kellen, agreed to let them stay for the night, but warned, "The traders are spreading word in every level. They say the human is hiding stolen property. Some of the bounty hunters don't care if you're alive or dead." That night, Rena couldn't sleep. She could hear faint noises outside, footsteps, muffled voices. At one point she thought she saw a shadow move past the window. Ethan was awake too, sitting in the corner with his weapon across his lap. "You don't sleep much," she said quietly. "Sleep gets you caught," he replied. In the early hours before dawn, a knock came at the door. 3 slow taps, then 2 fast. Kellen went to answer, but Ethan was already there, shaking his head. "Not the right code," he whispered. A second later, the door rattled violently. Someone was trying to force it open. Ethan shoved Rena behind him, weapon raised. The door held, but voices outside shouted orders. Boots pounded against the ground. They were surrounded. Kellen grabbed a hidden lever and pulled. A section of the floor slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel. "This leads to the old drainage paths," he said. "Go now." Ethan didn't hesitate. He pushed Rena toward the opening. "Move, I'm right behind you." They crawled through the dark, damp tunnel, the sound of water dripping echoing off the walls behind them. Muffled voices grew louder. They were being chased. When they emerged into a lower street, Ethan grabbed her hand and pulled her into another maze of alleyways. They didn't stop until they reached a small storage room hidden behind a wall of stacked crates. Ethan locked the door and finally let go of her hand. Rena's chest heaved, her heart pounding. "They won't stop, will they?" "No," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But neither will I." For the first time she believed him completely. The storage room was cramped, its walls lined with broken crates and dusty tools. A single lamp hung from the ceiling, casting a dim yellow glow. It wasn't much, but for now it was safe. Rena sat on the floor, her back against the wall, still catching her breath after the chase through the tunnels. Her clothes were damp, her hair stuck to her face, but her eyes were sharp, watching every move Ethan made. Ethan checked the locks again, then pulled a folded cloth from his bag and handed it to her. "Dry your hair, you'll get cold," he said. She took it hesitantly. "Why do you keep doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Helping me," she said quietly. "Most people wouldn't risk this much for someone they barely know." Ethan didn't answer right away. He sat across from her, leaning against a stack of crates. "Because I don't see you as something to trade," he said finally. "You're not cargo, you're not a price tag, you're you." His words sat heavy in the air. Rena looked away, unsure how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. In the days that followed, they stayed hidden, moving only when necessary. Ethan began teaching her more, how to spot someone tailing them, how to blend into a crowd, even how to use a small concealed blade. At first, she was clumsy, dropping the weapon, fumbling her stance. But Ethan didn't scold her. He corrected her quietly, patient with every mistake. One afternoon, he took her to an abandoned part of the Undercity to practice. The air was thick with dust, and old pipes creaked above their heads. "Hold it like this," he said, guiding her hands on the blade. "Not too tight, not too loose." She nodded. Trying again, this time her grip was better. "You're learning," he said with a faint smile. "That's good." The training wasn't just physical. Ethan also made her think. "If someone grabs you, what's your first move?" He asked. "Break free," she replied. "How?" "Step back, twist my wrist, then strike." He nodded. "Exactly. Don't freeze. Freezing gets you caught." Rena began to feel different, stronger in a way she hadn't before. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about knowing she had a choice, that she wasn't helpless anymore. But danger was never far. Whispers about them spread through the Undercity like smoke. Bounty hunters, traders, and mercenaries all wanted the human and the girl he had taken, some for money, others just to send a message. One night, as they rested in the storage room, Rena asked, "Ethan, do you think we can ever stop running?" He looked at her for a moment, then said, "Yes, but not until they stop chasing." "And if they never stop?" she asked. "Then we keep moving," he said. "Together." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. She didn't feel like a burden anymore. She felt like part of something, like a partner. The next morning, Ethan decided they needed better supplies. He took Rena to a hidden weapons dealer, a small shop disguised as a junk stall. The dealer, a tall alien with mechanical eyes, looked at Rena and smirked. "She's the one," he said. "The traders are screaming about you, girl." Rena's hand instinctively moved to the blade at her side. The alien laughed. "Feisty. Now I like it." Ethan stepped between them, his voice cold. "We're here for gear, not conversation." They left with a new communicator, extra ammunition, and a small shock device for Rena, light enough for her to carry in her pocket. Later, in a quiet alley, Ethan handed her the device. "If anyone grabs you, use it. No hesitation." She nodded, gripping it tightly. That night, as they sat by the heater, Rena asked him about his past. "You know mine," she said, "but I don't know yours." Ethan hesitated, then said, "I was a soldier once, fought in wars I didn't believe in, saw people being treated like numbers on a list. I left because I couldn't be part of it anymore. And now you're risking your life for me," she said. He met her gaze. "I risk my life for anyone worth saving. And you are." The silence between them was different now, not heavy like before, but steady, strong. But peace never lasted long. The next day, while moving through a market street, Rena noticed two figures following them. She tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Behind us," she whispered. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. "I see them." They took a sharp turn into an alley, but the footsteps behind quickened. Ethan pulled her into a side passage, pressed against the wall, and waited. When the two bounty hunters passed, Ethan moved fast, knocking one down with a blow to the back of the neck. Rena didn't freeze. She used her shock device on the second, who fell with a cry. Ethan looked at her and gave a short nod. "Good," he said. "You're learning." They left quickly, disappearing into the crowd. For the first time, Rena realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting back. And in that moment, she understood something. She wasn't Ethan's burden, she was his equal. The city's lower levels had always been dangerous, but now every step felt like walking across a thin bridge over fire. The whispers had grown louder, the bounty higher, and the hunters more determined. Ethan knew they couldn't keep hiding forever. Sooner or later, the black market cartel would close in, and when they did, it would be a fight they couldn't avoid. Rena stood by the door of the safe house, watching him check the weapons charge and load extra ammunition into his belt. "They're coming, aren't they?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Ethan replied without looking up. "The only question is when." Her fingers tightened on the small shock device he had given her, the one she had already used once. "If they catch us, they won't." Ethan interrupted firmly. But if they try, you fight. You don't stop moving, you understand? She nodded, her heart pounding. That night, they moved again, taking the old maintenance tunnels beneath the city. The air was damp and heavy, the sound of dripping water echoing around them. Ethan's pace was steady, but his eyes never stopped. Scanning the shadows, his hand always near his weapon. Halfway through the tunnel, a faint metallic clink echoed behind them. Rena froze. "Ethan." "I hear it," he said, his voice low. "Keep moving." The sound grew louder. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Ethan pulled her into a narrow side passage. The walls close on both sides. 3 shapes emerged from the tunnel ahead, tall. Armored figures with glowing red visors, their weapons ready. "Bounty hunters," Ethan murmured. "Stay behind me." The lead hunter's voice was cold through a mechanical filter. "Hand over the girl, human, and you live," Ethan raised his weapon. "You're going to have to work for it." The fight was sudden, deafening in the tight space. The tunnel filled with flashes of light and the sharp crack of weapons firing. Ethan moved like a soldier trained for years, each shot precise, each step calculated. One hunter tried to flank them, but Rena didn't freeze. She activated her shock device and struck. The jolt sent the hunter stumbling back with a curse. "Good," Ethan said quickly. "Now move." They ran deeper into the tunnel, the hunter's shouts echoing behind them. At the next intersection, Ethan grabbed a small explosive from his pack, set it against the wall, and pushed Rena forward. "Keep going. Don't look back," he said. Seconds later, the blast roared behind them, collapsing part of the tunnel, buying them time. They emerged into the industrial sector of the city. The air filled with steam and the hum of heavy machinery. Ethan led her through the maze of pipes and catwalks, but he knew the cartel wouldn't stop. They would send more by nightfall. They reached an abandoned cargo yard, rows of rusted containers. Stretching into the dark, Ethan chose one near the center and forced the door open. "This will do for now," he said, locking it from the inside. Rena sat on an old crate, her legs trembling from exhaustion. "We can't keep running forever," she whispered. Ethan crouched in front of her, his eyes steady. "I know, that's why we end it." "End it?" she echoed. "We take the fight to them," he said. "I've been gathering information since I bought you from that market. I know where they keep their records, their credits, their deals. If we destroy that, they lose power." Rena stared at him, fear and something else, determination, building inside her. "You're asking me to fight," she said. "I'm asking you to choose," he replied. "You can keep running, or you can help me make sure they never do this to anyone else." She thought of the cages, the auctions, the faces of others like her, scared, hopeless, waiting for someone who never came. "I'll help," she said finally, her voice firm. The plan was dangerous. The cartel's central office was heavily guarded, but it wasn't impossible. Ethan explained each step, how they'd slip in through the maintenance ducts, where they'd plant the charges, how they'd escape before the building collapsed. The next day, they moved at dawn. Blending into the early crowds, Rena kept her head down, the small shock device hidden in her sleeve, her mind replaying the plan over and over. When they reached the outer edge of the cartel's territory, Ethan gave her a quick nod. "This is it," he said. "Once we start, there's no turning back." "I'm not turning back," she replied. They slipped into the maintenance tunnel that led under the building, the air thick with dust, every step echoing softly. At the far end, Ethan pried open a vent and motioned for her to follow. They crawled through the narrow duct, the sound of voices and footsteps above them. Finally, they reached the storage room where the cartel kept its records, stacks of data pads, ledgers, and credit boxes. Ethan began placing small charges around the room, while Rena stood watch. By the door, suddenly, heavy footsteps approached. 2 guards entered, their eyes widening when they saw her. "Stop!" one shouted, reaching for his weapon. Rena didn't think. She moved, striking with the shock device. The guard dropped instantly. Ethan turned, finishing the second before he could raise the alarm. "You're getting good at this," he said with a faint smile. The charges were set, and they slipped back into the ducts. Ethan pressed the detonator once they were clear. The explosion shook the ground, a deep rumble echoing through the city. Smoke and fire rising from the cartel's heart. They didn't stop moving until they were far from the chaos. For the first time, Rena felt like the chains in her mind had begun to break. The blast still echoed in Rena's ears as they moved through the dark alleys. Behind them, a thick cloud of smoke rose into the air. The center of the black market cartel was gone. The city above was in chaos. Alarms blared, lights flashed, people shouted as they ran in every direction. Some were trying to escape the fire. Others were trying to take advantage of the confusion. Ethan led her through the twisting streets, his steps fast but steady, his eyes scanning every corner. He knew the cartel wouldn't give up so easily, even with their headquarters destroyed. They would want revenge. They ducked into a narrow side street, where the noise faded slightly. Rena leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Did we really do it?" she asked. Ethan nodded once. "We hit them where it hurts. They've lost their records, their credits, and most of their control. But there's one more thing we need to do." "What's that?" she asked. "We free the others," he said, his voice firm. That night, they made their way to one of the cartel's holding sites, a long warehouse on the edge of the Undercity, guarded by only a few men now that the chaos had spread. Ethan took out the first guard silently, while Rena moved quickly to disable the lock on the main door. The inside was dark, rows of cages lining both sides. The smell of fear was thick in the air. Quiet sobs and whispers filled the space. Faces pressed against the bars as they saw the two figures enter. "It's all right," Ethan said loudly enough for them to hear. "You're free now." Some didn't believe it at first. They had been told lies too many times before. But when Rena moved forward, pulling the keys from a guard's belt and opening the first cage, the truth began to sink in. One by one, they freed the captives, men, women, children, from dozens of worlds, their eyes wide with shock and relief. When the last lock clicked open, Rena stood in the middle of the room, looking at the faces around her. "Go," she said, her voice steady. "Find your families, find your homes, but never let them take you again." The freed captives scattered into the night, disappearing into the maze of streets. Ethan and Rena stayed until the last one was gone, then slipped away before more guards could arrive. By dawn, they were far from the Undercity, standing on a quiet ridge overlooking the city skyline. The rising sun painted the buildings gold. Rena sat on a low wall, watching the light spread. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe without fear. Ethan stood nearby, his gaze on the horizon, his expression unreadable. She looked at him and finally asked the question she had held back since the day they met. "Why, Emmy?" He turned to her. "What do you mean?" "Back in the market," she said. "There were others, dozens of them, so why did you choose me?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice calm. "Because when I saw you standing there, you still had fight. In your eyes you didn't beg, you didn't break, you were still you. Even if they tried to take that away, and I knew if I got you out, you'd do more than just survive, you'd help change things." Rena felt her throat tighten. "I'm not the same person I was back then." "No," Ethan said with a faint smile. "You're stronger now." They stood in silence for a while, the wind cool against their faces, below them. The city still buzzed with the chaos they had left behind. Somewhere in that mess, the cartel's leaders were scrambling, their power broken, their fear growing. Ethan finally spoke. "You have a choice now. Rena, you can come with me, or you can go find your own path. No one will ever own you again." She thought about it. About the idea of leaving him, about walking into a galaxy she barely knew on her own. But the answer came easily. "I'm staying," she said. "Not because I have to. Because I want to." A rare smile touched his lips. "Then let's go, partner." They left the ridge together, disappearing into the winding roads beyond the city. side by side, not as a rescuer and rescued, not as buyer and bought, but as equals. And as they walked, Rena knew something for certain. Her worth was not in her weight, or her price, or the label they had given her. It was in her will to live, to fight, and to choose her own fate. Ethan had seen it the moment he laid eyes on her, and now she saw it too. Somewhere far behind them, the black market lay in ruins. Its chains broken, its captives free, but for Rena, the true victory was something deeper. She was free inside, and no one would take that from her again.